I hadn't stepped inside the headquarters of Rourke Technologies in almost 5 years, but the invitation arrived on a Wednesday morning like a sharp knock on a door I'd already locked. It came in the form of an embossed card slid into my mailbox, with my brother's handwriting sprawled across the envelope. Retirement celebration for Margaret Rourke, Saturday evening. Formal attire. Family expected. Expected. That word lingered in my head like a bad taste. My older brother, Nathan, always had a way of turning an invitation into a command. I sat at the kitchen counter staring at the card until Clara walked in, still tying her hair back. She plucked the card from my hand and read it aloud. Retirement celebration? For your mother? She raised an eyebrow. Since when is she retiring? That's news to me, I said, taking the card back. Mom hasn't mentioned a word. She's been running the company with more energy than Nathan ever had. Clara leaned against the counter, studying me. So you're going? I shook my head instinctively. No. I cut ties with that place for a reason. Every time I walk in there, it's a battlefield with Nathan. I'm not walking into one of his productions just so he can parade around like the golden sun. She didn't answer right away. She just crossed her arms, her gaze steady. I knew that look. Clara was never one to back down when she smelled trouble. Daniel, she said softly, you should go. But, because this doesn't feel right. Your mother never said she was retiring, and Nathan sending you an expected invitation reeks of something bigger. If you don't go, you'll regret it. I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew she was right. Clara had an instinct for people, for motives hidden beneath polite smiles. If she was uneasy, I had to take it seriously. So on Saturday evening, we drove downtown and pulled into the glass-fronted tower that bore our last name in polished steel letters, Rourke Technologies. My father had built it from the ground up, but it was my mother who kept it alive after his death. Every time I saw those letters, I thought about the hours she sacrificed, the years she gave up to keep it afloat. And now suddenly she was retiring? The lobby was dressed up like a gala, champagne flutes circulating on silver trays, a string quartet playing near the marble staircase, employees dressed in their finest. Everything looked polished, perfect. But the perfection itself set my nerves on edge. It didn't feel like a celebration, it felt staged. Nathan spotted us the moment we stepped in. He was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my entire car, his smile sharp enough to cut glass. He strode over, arms open. Daniel, he said, drawing my name out like it was some foreign word he had to practice. I'm glad you came. Clara's grip tightened on my hand. I forced a smile. Wouldn't miss it, I said flatly. Nathan looked her over briefly. Clara, always a pleasure. She didn't smile back. Nathan. The tension in her voice made his grin falter, but only for a second. He motioned toward the grand hall upstairs. Come, Mother's waiting. We followed him up the staircase, past portraits of our parents in the company's early days, and I felt that familiar twist of resentment. Nathan had always been the heir apparent, the golden child, the one expected to lead. I was the one who left, who pursued a career in software design on my own, away from family shadows. But when we entered the banquet hall, all of that faded, replaced by something colder. My mother sat at the head of the long table, dressed in a silver gown that shimmered under the lights. But she looked wrong. Her posture slouched, her eyes glassy, her smile slow and unfocused. When she saw me, it took her a full 3 seconds to react, as though her brain had to catch up. Daniel, she said finally, her voice thin. You came. I bent down and kissed her cheek. It was warm, clammy. She smelled faintly of lavender, but underneath that, I caught something medicinal. Of course I came, Ma. I wouldn't miss this. She nodded slowly, her eyelids fluttering like staying awake was a battle. Clara squeezed my arm and leaned close. She doesn't look well, she whispered. I nodded, my stomach tightening. As we took our seats, I scanned the room. Several board members sat near Nathan, but they were faces I didn't recognize. They looked uncomfortable, whispering among themselves. When I tried to catch their eye, they looked away. Nathan stood at the far end, raising a glass. Tonight, we celebrate a legend. Our mother, Margaret Rourke, who after decades of leadership, is finally stepping into well-deserved retirement. The future of this company is bright, and tonight marks the beginning of a new chapter. Everyone clapped politely, but the sound was hollow, rehearsed. My mother didn't lift her glass. She just stared at the table, eyelids heavy. I leaned toward Clara. "She's not retiring," I muttered. She shook her head slightly. "No. Something's wrong." At that moment, one of the strangers near Nathan leaned toward him, whispering something I couldn't hear. Nathan nodded, his expression sharp, his eyes flicking toward me for just a second before returning to the toast. A chill went down my spine. This wasn't just a party. This was something else. And I was starting to realize I'd walked right into the middle of it. The rest of the evening blurred into a polite nightmare. Waiters glided past with trays of champagne, the quartet played their elegant background music, and Nathan worked the room like a politician. He shook hands, laughed too loudly at bad jokes, and kept glancing toward me as if checking whether I was still in my seat. I tried to focus on my mother. She sat quietly, lifting her glass occasionally but never really drinking. Her hand trembled slightly when she set it back down. "Mom," I said softly, leaning closer so others wouldn't hear, "are you okay?" Her eyes moved slowly to mine, delayed, as though my voice had to travel through fog. "Of course, Daniel," she said. "Just tired. Long day." Her words slurred on the edges. That wasn't normal. My mother had always been sharp, articulate, commanding. This wasn't fatigue. This was something else. Clara touched her hand gently. "You don't seem yourself, Mrs. Rourke. Have you seen a doctor recently?" Mother smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Doctors. Nathan takes care of it." I looked across the table at Nathan. He was in the middle of a story, gesturing dramatically, making the board members laugh. But I noticed how none of them seemed relaxed. Their laughter was stiff, their smiles forced. Clara leaned toward me, her lips barely moving. "Something's wrong here." "I know," I whispered. Half an hour later, when the string quartet paused for a break, I excused myself to stretch my legs. Clara followed, looping her arm through mine. The hallway outside the banquet room was quieter, but not empty. I noticed two men in dark suits standing near the elevators, watching. They weren't employees. I could tell by their posture, the earpieces, the way their eyes scanned constantly. "Security," Clara murmured. "Not the kind the company hires," I muttered. We strolled past them, pretending not to notice. My stomach was tight, the way it used to get before exams in college. As we circled back toward the main hall, Clara slowed suddenly. A pair of voices carried faintly from behind a half-open conference room door. "Vote is ready, papers finalized," one voice said. "She won't even know what she's signing," another whispered. Clara tugged my sleeve, motioning me forward. We didn't linger long, it was too risky, but the words rattled in my head like a warning bell. "Papers. Signing." When we returned to the banquet hall, Nathan was standing behind my mother, adjusting her chair, whispering something into her ear. She nodded sluggishly. Clara squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "Daniel. They're setting her up." I didn't answer. My throat felt dry. The dinner courses came and went. Every time I tried to draw my mother into conversation, Nathan intercepted. He steered the dialogue toward himself, toward the company's future, toward vague promises of bold changes ahead. By dessert, Clara excused herself to find the restroom. Nathan barely glanced at her as she slipped out, but I felt his eyes on me, sharp and watchful. Minutes stretched like hours. I tried to keep calm, sipping my champagne without tasting it, listening to Nathan drone about market growth and international partnerships. My mind was with Clara. What was she seeing? What was she hearing? Finally, she returned, her face carefully neutral. She slid into the chair beside me and leaned close. Her voice was barely audible over the clinking silverware. "Daniel," she whispered, "there are papers in the side office. Contracts. Stock transfer agreements. And your name, your signature, already on them." My stomach dropped. "What?" "I saw them. They're planning to shift control from your mother. It's already staged to look like you agreed." I gripped my glass so hard I thought it might shatter. That's forgery. That's... Not just that, Clara interrupted. Her eyes flicked toward my mother, who was listlessly pushing cake around her plate. On the tea tray in that office, I found bottles. Prescription labels scratched off. They're mixing something into her drinks. That's why she's like this. I looked at my mother again. Her eyelids drooped. Her fork trembled in her hand. She wasn't tired, she was drugged. Rage surged in my chest, hot and choking. Nathan's laugh echoed at the far end of the table, smooth and confident. He had planned this. He was stripping our mother's authority piece by piece, drugging her into silence, forging papers to make it look legitimate. Clara's hand touched mine under the table, grounding me. "Don't do anything here," she whispered. "We can't let him know we know. We need to get out quietly." She was right. As much as I wanted to leap across the table and smash Nathan's smug face against the polished wood, that would only tip him off. We needed evidence. We needed help. I forced a smile, raising my glass as Nathan launched into yet another toast. "To the future," he declared. "To the future," the board echoed, though their voices were thin. I lifted my glass, hiding the storm in my eyes. The future, but not the one my brother imagined. Clara's words stayed buried in my skull long after dessert plates were cleared away. Forged contracts. My mother's legacy dangling like a puppet on Nathan's strings. I sat stiff in my chair, nodding occasionally at whatever Nathan was saying, but my focus was elsewhere. Every second that passed, I felt more like an intruder in my own family. The air seemed too thick, the smiles too wide, the laughter too rehearsed. Clara leaned close again, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. "We need to leave. Now." I nodded, setting my fork down. "Mom," I said gently, "Clara and I are going to step out for a bit. We'll be back." She blinked slowly, her expression distant. "Of course, dear." I kissed her cheek again, though my chest ached seeing her like this, robbed of her sharpness, her willpower, her voice. I wanted to promise I'd fix it, but the words stuck in my throat. Clara slid her arm into mine and we rose casually, thanking Nathan for the lovely evening. His smile froze on his face. "Leaving already?" "Just some fresh air," Clara said smoothly. "It's a bit warm in here." Nathan's eyes flicked between us, searching. For a moment, I thought he'd stop us, press harder. But he simply chuckled and clapped me on the back. "Don't wander too far. The board vote starts soon." The words made my stomach knot. Board vote. He wasn't even hiding it anymore. We walked out of the banquet hall, down the marble staircase, past the suited men at the elevator. Clara's hand gripped mine tightly as we moved, forcing me to maintain pace, to keep calm. Only when the lobby doors slid closed behind us and the night air hit my face did I let out a shaky breath. "Okay," I said, running a hand through my hair. "Tell me everything." She glanced around, empty sidewalks, the city glowing in steel and glass around us, before pulling me toward the car. Once inside, she locked the doors, her voice low and urgent. "The contracts were already signed, Daniel. With your name on them. They're transferring voting stock from your mother to Nathan. And the way they worded it, it looks like you endorsed it too." "Forgery," I muttered. "He's framing me as part of this." That's not all. On the side table, there were bottles, small, brown, prescription bottles with the labels scratched off. I recognized one of the pills. It's a sedative. Enough to keep her drowsy, confused, unable to fight. The picture was horrifyingly clear. Nathan wasn't just trying to outmaneuver our mother. He was incapacitating her, drugging her into silence. And then staging documents to prove she was unfit to run the company. "This is bigger than family drama," I said finally. "This is fraud. Elder abuse. Criminal." Clara nodded. "Which means we can't confront him directly. Not yet. We need someone who can actually do something." I gripped the steering wheel without starting the car. "There's one person we can call." An hour later, we sat in the office of William Cartwright, my father's old lawyer. The man was in his 60s now, white-haired but sharp-eyed, his desk buried under papers and case files. He listened without interrupting as Clara and I laid everything out, the drug tea, the forged contracts, the whispers about a vote. When I finished, silence stretched across the room. Cartwright tapped his pen against the desk, then leaned back. "Your brother has gone too far," he said finally. "Forgery is one thing. But if what you're saying about the drugs is true, that's attempted incapacitation. Judges don't look kindly on that." "Judges?" I echoed. He gave me a level look. "Daniel, this isn't just family business anymore. This is criminal law. You need to take this to the police immediately. And you need to do it before that vote finalizes." Clara leaned forward. "We have enough evidence?" Cartwright nodded. "If you can get me those papers and the pills, yes. Combined with your mother's condition, it's more than enough to open a case." My phone buzzed in my pocket. When I pulled it out, my stomach dropped. A text message glowed on the screen from an unknown number. "Why did you leave?" I stared at it, the blood draining from my face. "Daniel?" Clara asked. I showed her the screen. Her lips tightened. "He knows." Cartwright frowned. "Then time is running out. If Nathan suspects you're onto him, he'll move faster." I stood abruptly. "Then we move faster." Clara rose beside me, her hand brushing mine. Her eyes were calm, steady. "We're not letting him win." For the first time in years, I believed her. We left Cartwright's office with a plan forming, the city lights stretching out before us like a battlefield. My brother thought he was clever, weaving papers and poisons into a web around our mother. But webs can be broken. And this time, I wasn't walking away. The next morning came with a kind of heaviness I hadn't felt since my father's funeral. The city buzzed as it always did, cars honking, vendors shouting, phones ringing, but for me, everything was narrowed down to one thing. Today was the day Nathan's plan fell apart. Clara and I sat at the lawyer's office again, a small black evidence bag between us. Inside were the items Clara had taken from the conference room, the forged contracts and the brown pill bottles she had slipped into her purse. Cartwright had been quick to catalog them, photograph them, and send copies to the police. "They'll move in during the board vote," he explained, his voice calm but sharp. "That's when Nathan will make his final push. If he believes he has control, he'll show his hand. That's when we'll strike." I nodded, my chest tight. "And Mom?" "Leave her to the professionals," Cartwright said. "Once the doctors know what's been in her system, she'll come back to herself. She'll recover." Recover. The words sat in my chest like fragile glass. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear it. By the time we arrived at the corporate headquarters again, my hands were clammy. The grand lobby was filled with men in suits and polished shoes, their voices echoing off the marble walls. Nathan had spared no expense in staging his power grab. It wasn't just a vote, it was a coronation. He stood near the elevator, greeting board members with that trademark smile. When his eyes landed on me, his smile sharpened into something predatory. "Daniel," he said smoothly, clapping me on the shoulder. "I was worried you wouldn't come back." Clara, looking radiant as always. Clara forced a polite nod. I could feel her hand tighten around mine like a silent anchor. "Wouldn't miss it," I said flatly. Nathan's eyes glittered. "Good. You'll want to see history being made." We followed the crowd into the top-floor boardroom, an opulent space of glass walls and sleek oak tables. My mother sat at the head, pale and unfocused, a cup of tea steaming gently in front of her. My stomach twisted at the sight. Nathan took his place at her side, sliding a folder of papers onto the table. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "today marks a new chapter for this company. For too long, outdated leadership has slowed us down. But with new guidance, fresh energy, and majority stock under my stewardship, the doors burst open. Two uniformed officers strode in, followed by a stern-faced detective. Gasps rippled around the room. Nathan froze mid-sentence, his smile faltering. "Mr. Nathan Hale?" the detective said firmly. "We need to have a word." Nathan chuckled, spreading his hands. "Officers, I'm sure there's some mistake." "There's no mistake," the detective interrupted. "We have evidence of prescription tampering, fraud, and forgery under your name. You'll need to come with us." The room erupted into whispers. Board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, eyes darting between Nathan and the police. Nathan's mask cracked. His face hardened, jaw tight, eyes flashing toward me. "You," he hissed. I didn't move. Didn't gloat. Didn't even blink. I just met his glare with silence, letting it sink in that he had lost. Clara reached into her purse and placed the brown bottles gently on the table in front of the detective. "These were taken from the room where his mother's drinks were prepared," she said steadily. "Test them." The detective nodded, bagging them. Nathan surged to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "Daniel's behind this. He's trying to destroy me. He's always been jealous." "Save it for the judge," the detective said coldly, clapping handcuffs around Nathan's wrists. The sound of metal snapping shut was like thunder rolling through the room. I glanced at my mother. Her eyes were unfocused, her head lolling slightly, but when she looked at me, for the briefest moment, something sharp flickered through her gaze. Recognition. Relief. The police led Nathan out, his protests echoing uselessly down the hall. Silence fell over the boardroom, broken only by the steady hum of the city beyond the glass walls. One of the board members cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mr. Hale," he said to me, "what happens now?" I looked at my mother, then back at the table of strangers who had almost let Nathan crown himself king. "What happens now," I said slowly, "is that this company goes back to being what my father built it to be. No more schemes. No more poison." Clara slipped her hand into mine under the table. The weight of it steadied me. Hours later, when my mother was safely in the hospital and doctors confirmed the drugs were leaving her system, I finally allowed myself to breathe. She slept peacefully, her chest rising and falling with steady rhythm. Clara sat beside me in the hospital room, her hand brushing my arm. "You did it," she whispered. I shook my head. "We did it." And for the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of peace settle in my chest. Not triumph, not vengeance, not even victory. Just peace. Nathan had tried to steal everything. Our mother's clarity, our family's legacy, my own place in the world. He thought silence and poison would win. But in the end, he underestimated the simplest weapon of all. The truth.